manufacturing, technology, hot topics, and a little bit of tomfoolery. This is the MTD Podcast.
Welcome to today's MTD Podcast. It's episode 12, and I've got 3 reprobates with me today. A little bit different. Normally there's 2. Joe's back with us. How you doing, Joe?
I'm really good. How are you?
Yeah, not so bad, not so bad. You packed in that diet now then? It didn't last long, did it?
Do you know what?
That's a bit harsh, isn't it?
Do you know, if I'd have predicted what the opening comments would have been, it would have been something to do with Arsenal or weight loss. But as Man United beat Arsenal of late, I'd have narrowed it down to a diet.
It was in the Black Country paper. Hang on, can I just say this? It was in the Black Country paper that Cadbury's went down to a 4-day week when you were on your diet.
Oh, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? Tomfoolery, you always miss him out.
Okay, so there's
5
4
of
of
us.
you.
5 of us.
Yeah, 4 reprobates.
Including you.
Gio, how you doing? You much better?
I'm fully recovered, Paul. I'm well, thank you.
Penicillin worked, cleared
It
the rash
has,
up?
yeah. Just, good. What do you have penicillin for? Oh, no, actually, don't tell us, Joe. It's a long story.
He had a rash in his throat.
Have you still got the itching?
Oh, it's nearly gone. Yeah, just leave the swelling.
No, that wasn't swelling.
But I went out with him the other day, not in a gay day sort of way. It was for work. He took sanitizer with him. It was, you have these little squirty bottles. Every time he touched somebody, squirt. He had like a 5-litre vat of flipping stuff.
Bit like Swarfiga. Have you ever put your hands in Swarfiga?
Swarfiga and chips.
Yeah. Did you ever used to use Swarfiga in the factories?
My mate used to use it to mimic something else.
Did he? Yeah.
But I won't say what it is. But
and did you ever used to use barrier cream as well?
Yes,
we
used to use barrier cream.
Yeah,
that was horrible
stuff.
Yeah,
awful stuff.
What do you use it for?
Well, just awful stuff. It used to get into your nails and everything. But it used to smell. I used to work on a machine where we used to do vertical turning on flywheels.
That's the first lie of the day, Paul, because you just said you worked.
And we used to machine flywheels, and they made a cast iron. Have you ever worked in a machine shop where you've had cast iron? It just you just stink of it all the time.
Yeah, awful stuff.
Do you know what? 20 years on, you've still got the same remnant smell.
Iron. Any jokes today, Paul?
Only one.
Oh, no.
Only one. But it's a good one. It's worth waiting for.
Who told you that?
I had to go to the doctors the other day. I had a steering wheel hanging out me flies. It was driving me nuts.
Please don't.
Right, 5-axis machines. Let's talk about 5-axis machines. That is
5-axis milling.
5-axis milling machines. That is the topic for today. So we're going to talk generally about how they're built, the different types of configurations you can have, and why you would select one over the other. Let's start with Mr. G-Man over in the corner there. 5-axis machines. What different styles have you seen, and what do you like?
There's so many different styles now. I mean, you've got the traditional 5-axis machine where you've got your Z, X and Y, and then you've got your A and your C axis. So that is the most common 5th-axis machine, but they have been, I'd say, evolving over the years. You've got Herco and Mazak that have brought out some machines, and DMG Mori that I've seen as well, actually, where you've got like a 3-axis machine with a C-axis in the machine bed and then your tilting head. So there's lots of different configurations now. The Groupus Parpus one that we've done a review on recently was a really different 5th-axis machine that I've been familiarised with, and the configuration of that machine tool was totally different and bespoke to make engine ring parts effectively.
You mentioned that one, that Herco one, which you've seen, haven't you, Colin?
With the C-axis in the table.
C-axis at the table. Is it Gavin?
Gareth? No, Gavin. Gareth, Wheelbar Components, absolutely loves it. With the software, brilliant.
On the testing, what's the benefit of having that style of machine?
Flexibility, so you could still do 3-axis work, but it's got I don't know what else.
It's because it's much bigger. You've got a big working envelope. You've got a huge X-axis, but so you can treat it like a traditional meter vertical machining center, with the fact you've got that C-axis table, and then you can use the tip-in head to do any
so
sides.
Would that be positional, or could you drive all 5 axes simultaneously?
I believe on the Herco you can. Full 5. In fact, we saw one of the components they were machining there was using OpenMind software, wasn't it? And that was doing full 5-axis.
That's a great configuration for a machine, isn't it? Where you've got the bed, that must be 2 meters in length, that bed. The one I've seen, or 1.5 certainly. So there's no other machine, well there is, but there's not many machines where you can get a component of that size on and put a vice on and simultaneous, albeit that's probably 600 or 800.
What's the disadvantage to that though?
Oh, taking a quick step back though, the spinner, because that's got the C-axis on the end, isn't it, from memory? Because you can have the benefit of the long table on the X.
It's a bigger machine, but yeah,
But
you've
then-
got a fixed table one end, and then you've got a 5-axis table the other, so you can use both.
But then,
or-
so then you can extend it out essentially.
yeah, you could use the whole working envelope of the fixed table and the C, A, and C axis. But what's the disadvantage of that Herco style machine over maybe a smaller knuckle?
Would it probably not as nimble, is it? I wouldn't think. And I don't want to do the Herco brand an injustice. Fabulous machine, and they've got both configurations. But maybe if you've got that tilt-in B axis, maybe it's not, you know, it's not as dynamic, if that's the right word to use.
But then are you limited to the size? Because with that big table, bigger components, even if you're using the full 5-axis, whereas if you've got that knuckle, relatively small components, if that's the whole table is swinging around.
And also the machine's much bigger, so the
Right.
footprint of the machine is much bigger. If you can't if you don't have the floor space. But I would have also thought the negative angle element. I don't know whether you can get the same negative.
So you go
angles.
minus 40 or
Yeah, you
30
wouldn't get
degrees,
the clearance on the head, would you?
No,
You can only go.
But people don't tend to mount it straight to the machines. The ones I've seen have been on some riser blocks with a vise or a fixture to, you know, for that.
yeah,
For that.
yeah.
But then again, how often we talk about negative angles? How often do you see that?
I don't
Oh,
know.
can't be
You do see them. I think that for me, it's not dedicated just for 5th-axis work. It kind of fits in the middle.
Horizontal, vertical,
Yeah,
5-axis.
you can use it as an horizontal as well. You know, you can put an actual tombstone on that configuration machine and use it as a horizontal, literally as an horizontal, and load up.
It's being versatile. It's like when Colin goes out on a Friday night, he'll put on a pair of 80s trousers, a pair of 90s shirt,
That's not versatile. That's just
a
I've got nothing
noughties
clean
jacket,
to it.
and a pair of plimsolls.
Yeah, and do you know how successful I am?
Very.
Fail. Massive fail every weekend.
But so you do that because then that gives you the opportunity with lots of different audiences, which
so I can
is
go
the
to an 80s
same.
night and 90s night.
Correct, which is the same as when an engineer's got a machine like that, they can pitch it to
That
various
is a
different.
dreadful analogy.
Pitch it
How about
various
you,
different-
Paul? What's your favourite configuration?
I like the knuckle table. It depends on the application, but I like the knuckle table. I like the dynamicness of it. For example,
Is that a word?
yeah,
Dynamicness.
dynamicness. Yeah, I like the Mazak Integrex style machine, that i700. I like the DMG Mori Evo machine.
When you say the knuckle, though,
they're nice. They've got those high speed agile tables on them. Also good access to them. You've got, but even Herco have their VC 500. XYZ have got their new machine, which has got a similar configuration. XYZ A and C. So there's so many brands that offer that style of machine, and I think that would have to be my favourite because they're faster,
And
easy to access, easy to set, easy to load.
when you
And
say faster, then is that linear drives or ball screws or?
some of these machines will have linear drive motors. What's the difference between a linear drive motor and a ball screw?
Don't look at me.
so linear machines, correct me if I'm wrong, it tends to be the A and the C. Not always, but the A and the C. So where you need your precision, where you need your dynamicness, is that a word? Where you need your most dynamic.
Just made that up.
No, it's not a word.
Okay. Well, where you
Just get
need
your words from.
need to be most dynamic, you know, where the seconds count, and that tends to be the rotary axis,
Well,
so the
milliseconds,
tilt
isn't it?
and the C axis rotation.
Are they as powerful though? So can you do like big castings, big cuts of metal?
You can, but typically you'd machine it differently, wouldn't you? You'd have a different strategy, maybe lighter cuts but going really fast.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. If you go to the more traditional non-linear machines, you can run a little slower, deeper cuts, and often have better metal removal rate.
But there would be an argument to suggest that by having linear drive motors, the machine's maintenance is less because there's no wearing parts. The accuracy is better again because you're not driving off a ball screw.
Why aren't all machines
And it's faster because they're more expensive.
Okay.
But you see different configurations. Usually, you'll see the box guideway in the Z. So you've got the rigidity in the Z where you actually need it, and then everything else is all about the speed, the movement in the C and the A. So you've got the rigidity where the spindle is where you need it, and everything else is moving around that, and that's where you all the forces are going through, really.
But there are so many options on that style of machine. I mean, I saw one from Makino at AMB, new, small, dynamic, high-speed 5-axis spinner. I know that we look at a lot of spinner machines, but they vary to great degrees in cost. So if I was to ask you the question about what's the lowest cost 5-axis machine, do you think, out there in the market? That would be a 3+2.
Give people something to work from. You sold a 5-axis. Well, you sold a 5-axis machine many years ago. Is that right?
Don't
Many
believe
of
it.
them.
Yeah,
Many
Don't
of them.
believe
many of them. Okay, yeah. We haven't found anybody who's actually you sold a machine to. But what was the price you
That's 'cause
quoted
you
from?
don't go out.
I do for a night, 90s, 80s, all my clobber. What?
You won't find a 5-axis machine in the places you go, I can tell you. But
Oh, she was flexible. Trust me.
they could be anything, generally 150, 180, 200, 250,000 pounds often.
And when
Okay.
was that, Paul? How long ago?
That was back in, when I was, 23, so that
God.
was about 10 years
40,
ago.
50 years ago.
Yeah.
Bloody hell. So
Early
prices,
2000s.
give us a clue. Prices have come down since then?
In a lot of instances, yes.
Yeah.
Some machines have even better technology now than they did have and they've gone up in price.
Yeah.
But some machines are built on an economies of scale basis, and they're even
There's
less.
there's several less than £100,000 now, isn't there?
Right. So I'm going to have a guess then.
I will guess £90,000. But again, when you put your spindle probe, your lasers, all the technology it should use, I would guess that puts it north of 100,000. But I would say machine on its own, 90,000.
Well, what a perfect way to get into 5-axis machining.
Yeah.
It's
3
made it an
plus 2.
affordable way, to get in there. And also, you look at companies now, and if you're a subcontractor, it's kind of, they feel like they need to have a fifth axis machine to be able to quote for fifth axis work at a competitive price. So I think it is.
Well, you
to be
take
able to-
Aerosmith, for example. I mean, the machine I know that costs around about, you're right, Joe, is about 90, might even be a bit
Not the
less than
band.
90,000. The what?
The band Aerosmith.
No. Aerosmith, the company in Coventry, he's got 5-axis machines from Leadwell. In fact, he's got a whole machine shop of Leadwell machines, but he's got these 5-axis machines, and they're doing high tolerance aerospace machining. He's a highly certified company, isn't he?
Yeah.
And the machines don't miss a beat. So he's got 5-axis solutions for
Aerosmith, don't miss a
critical
thing.
engine parts.
critical engine parts
Yeah.
as
If
well.
you're okay, we talk about 5-axis machining. You're doing three-axis machining, or maybe 3 plus 2. I don't know. But I want to buy a five-axis machine. How easy is it to convert or start using those? Because sometimes you do see machines that aren't being used because they don't really know how to use them.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's crazy to be in that situation.
Sorry,
but it does.
sorry, Paul. I was just
But
saying.
it does happen. I know, but you think the learning curve is quite short these days because you've got conversational programming elements. Own manufacturers have their own controls.
I
These smooth
think it
control,
depends, doesn't it? I go to LMS Precision in Droitwich. They don't have 5-axis technology, but if they did, they'd pick it up in a couple of days because they use CAM on other machines. But I think if you go to another company, don't use CAM, use FANUC cycles or even shop mill. I think it's still a learning curve. You're going to drive 5 axes in one hit. You need CAM that you've possibly never used before. There is a learning curve for sure, and no doubt you can run it the same day, next day, but it's gonna be a year, I would say, before you really get it singing.
FANUC controls. Which controls are best, or whatever you prefer?
They're all capable of driving the 5-axis machine. They all have conversational elements. FANUC, Siemens, Heidenhain. All of the
Other controls are available.
Herco's WinMax control or Max 5 control.
Smooth
That's
control,
a very
isn't it?
clever
Smooth control.
Exactly.
All of those controls are great controls. The build of the machines, let's talk about the A and the C axis. What's the difference between worm and wheel, belt driven and direct drive?
Well, you're asking a lot of questions, Paul. Why don't you answer that one for us?
Because that's why I'm
Joe,
asking the question, because I
throwing
don't
it
know
out.
the answer. That's the problem.
I know the answer to that because I've just read it off your crib sheet there.
That's wrong, though.
Belt. Rubber. Yeah. Belt driven is more. I won't say cheaper because that's not fair. More cost effective.
You know that thing you have around the top of your trousers?
Keep falling down.
Oh, yeah. The one,
Do
you
they
know the
do
thing that
braces
Joe-
drive as well then?
You know the one that Joe's got round his trousers?
Oh Christ!
They wouldn't fit
That
around the
runs a
machine.
massive machine.
But the belt drive is, I would class as an inferior build.
It's a commodity machine,
It's a
isn't it?
commodity
You're not
machine.
going to get the same
machine.
torque
No.
effectively. You're not going to get the same torque off a belt drive.
No.
Okay.
And you might have issues with backlash as well, which is when you go into the nightclubs.
No,
you get
Paul, don't
backlashes
go
as well.
there.
But you might have a problem with backlash when the tables turn precision, accuracy, or I say you might have a problem. It wouldn't be as good or wouldn't last as long as a direct drive or, in fact, a roller cam 5-axis machine. as well.
I've actually, just while we're talking commercials, I've got a quote here from Nigel Atherton of XYZ Machine Tools. And you wouldn't necessarily, up to 18 months ago, you wouldn't put him in a 5-axis bracket probably. But the quote is, in its price bracket, this is at the forefront of 5-axis machining. What are your thoughts on that? A brand you wouldn't necessarily associate with high-end machines. They've actually sold 2,000 around Europe, this type of machine.
We seen that machine at the AMRC, didn't we?
It's a
Just not
fabulous
long
machine.
after it got launched, doing cutting trials there, and it was on conical barrel machining, wasn't it? And I think that we've done a lot of reviews that you can see on MTD CNC and watch them. I think it's a top-class machine, especially
yeah.
for the price.
Well built, can't you add glass scales and things like that? You know, it is a very...
It all comes as standard with the machine. There's no optional extras. You know, it is what you see is what you get.
Is this one of knuckle machines, or has it got bed? Or sorry, just clarify.
It's a fully supported 5-axis, so it has a trunnion, but it's supported both sides.
Right.
And then that's another point. When you look at a trunnion table, some manufacturers will support them both, or support it one side and drive it on the other side. So they'll drive the A-axis with one motor essentially, but like these machines are driven with both motors. So you can, when you're talking 5-axis, something like a Matsuura would have double, would be driven both sides. Or
they're more stable, aren't they?
They're a more stable construction,
quicker, more powerful.
I think it just comes down to the fact that they'd be more powerful because you've got 2 drive motors as opposed to 1. But they would last longer because there's less strain on each drive motor, so it would be more accurate, heavier cuts, faster. But that Matsuura MX520, I mean, that's taken the UK market by storm, hasn't it? But that's that's a high performance precision 5-axis machine that is an incredibly affordable price.
Yeah, and the same with Mazak. You speak to the reps at Mazak. The perception is a top brand, top money, whereas they're not. They're obviously a well recognised brand in the marketplace, but they sell a lot of machines. In fact, their core client base is the SME market, people with 50 employees or less, which tells you it's an affordable machine. But I've got a question, and I'll warn you, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer, but how many 5-axis machines do we think are sold in the UK per annum?
That's not a very good question if you don't know the answer.
Well, I'm sure somebody listening will know the answer. Maybe they'll phone in or whatever you do nowadays on social media.
300.
I'd probably say more.
Really?
I'd probably say
more. 301.
Do you know what's scary? I would have gone... Yeah, somewhere between 300 and 350.
Really?
So
if all the machine tool companies can phone in and we can add it all up and we'll get an answer.
Maybe the MTA can help us out, but 325, would be my guess.
I just want to also, I don't hit me microphone there. I don't want to stop talking about the build here while we're on this as well. Different styles of build. The bridge type machine, the C-frame machine. These are all different configurations that again give you different outcomes in terms of their dynamic machining capability, but the C-frame has to be the most popular, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it's the most affordable. But the bridge type is definitely for tool makers, is a more rigid machine compared to the C-frame construction.
Would it be a bigger machine if you're talking a bridge?
It means generally bridge machines are much bigger. They can get bigger, can't they? I mean, we've looked at many of them. But you've got the travelling column element as well, where the X-axis is moving on the column or as opposed to the table. So the way all these machines are built, these different manufacturers obviously explore the best way to make the machine precise and last a long time. And the castings that they build them out of, it's like your boots, some of them, aren't they, Joe?
Oh dear, go on, Joe.
What, designer? Not smelly?
Kinky boots.
Stylish?
None of the above. Concrete. Polymer concrete.
Application
bases.
specific.
Yeah,
concrete. How much heavier do you think a polymer concrete base can be compared to a normal cast iron?
I wouldn't have thought it was heavier.
I'm going to say 2.5 times heavier.
Yeah, that's about right.
Is there also advantages with thermal growth with that concrete rather than cast iron?
I believe so, but I believe a lot of the thermal growth, there probably is, but I think a lot of the thermal growth is dealt with on the machine itself, in the technology of the machine. I mean, some of the machines, you mentioned Gruppus Parpus earlier, one of their 5-axis machines. He's going to say bless you in a minute, but those Gruppus Parpus machines have an air curtain around them, which basically reduces the thermal growth of the machine because it keeps every element of the machine cool the bigger it's got.
Yeah, if you look at, sorry Colin, the Boss machine we saw up at Forge Masters, okay, we're not talking VTL, but that's a full simultaneous 5-axis VTL. And those axes, believe it or not, are travelling on a thin layer of oil. They're not actually sat metal to metal, it's actually travelling on a thin layer of oil.
That's a fantastic machine.
What about tool changes? Go on, Gio.
There was one machine we haven't mentioned yet, is the 5-axis horizontal. We've seen a lot of them at Mac from a few different suppliers, and I think that there's some really huge advantages to that configuration with swarf evacuation. And also the rigidity of the spindle, because the spindle is a lot more rigid when it's coming to the component in that orientation. So that is a way in which fifth axis machine tools have evolved, and also the palletization of fifth axis machine tools. We haven't touched on that yet. I mean, automation is probably one of the biggest things in the UK and one of the secrets to our success moving forward. And I think that if we can palletize fifth axis machines, there's not really much we can't do.
Well, we're doing a separate podcast on automation.
We will, but how many of these machinery manufacturers now are developing machines that have these MX330, for example? Again, I come back to the Mazak, but the Mazak have one. Is it the i300 AWC?
Yeah, but we can see where it's going. It's going to run through the range.
Yeah, but some other 5-axis machine suppliers can bolt on systems like the Lang system, can't they?
And the Aroa system,
and the
for
Aroa
example.
system. So you've got that option of automation. One thing we haven't spoke about is tooling, tool changes. What would you say is the most common amount of tools you'd have in a 5-axis machine as a standalone machine?
I can tell you, they all say it's never enough, but I would say not as many as 48 would be my guess, expandable to hundreds, but standard off the shelf 48 would be the average, would be my guess.
There's quite a few machines that have only got 30, and I think to myself, sometimes
It's not enough.
It's not. When you're talking about automation, standard automation, you need upwards of 100 tools, in my opinion.
I think that what I've seen, and there's a common trend between the OEMs that I've been noticing, is that they're making their machine tools modular. With the tools, you can add on. With the automation, you can add on. They're making them as kind of, all right, you haven't got it now, but don't worry about it. You can add it on later. And I think that's a really great feature to have, because you know where your business is now, but you don't know where it's going to be in a year's time, or you don't know what new parts are going to be coming into your shop floor. So I think that's a really nice way of looking at our industry now. It's not just you buy it and you're stuck with it. It's adaptable.
If you can add to them, it's always good. The spinner machine, again, is a different style of machine. You have the 5-axis table one side and a fixed table for the left, which gives you something called pendulum machining, which is obviously
Machine based
You've got a
size.
stunned look there from everybody.
didn't
I'm
I?
not sure what
Incredibly,
that
Which
really.
is what?
Pendulum machining, so you can machine one side while the other side is being set, or you're it's like a pendulum moving left.
Yeah,
left to
there's
right.
a few machines. I know the VTC Mazak does something similar. But just while we're on the tool changer, what do you think is the best configuration? Well, I'll throw it out to you guys. I've got my personal favourite, but the actual configuration where the tool changing takes place.
outside of the working envelope, at the back of the machine. It should ideally.
Yeah, but if it's having to go back to the back of the machine, that's going to slow the process down.
It might slow it down, but if the machine's fast, the problem you have with tool chat, how many times did I used to have to go in the machine and clear swarf off a tool which had been changed? And the swarf had got caught up in the tool changer during the previous machine in operation, and you had to go and stop the machine, open the door, change it. If you're slow and not agile like Joe, that will add
Joe,
a few
that's
seconds
a cat
to the
calling the
process.
dog a
won't it?
furry ass, isn't it?
It gets so tiresome, you know.
We could do with having a running
Well,
race,
as we were mentioning
Good
food,
grief.
I mean, the chip-to-chip times are quite quick on all the machines now, so I won't worry about that. I think that it's got to be within the machine to not get any swarf on the tools.
My two favourites are the Brother Fanuc style, where it's literally inches away from the machining process, and it's chip to chip, sub 1 second, aren't they? Some of them, but also the Mazak style, where maybe it's another 100 mil away, but the chip to chip time is still basically 1 second. It's away from the machining environment, but it's just a little dawn away.
Yeah, I totally agree with Joe. I think that there's so many different configurations. They're all application specific.
Oh, you like that? I was going to say application specific.
I've got another question for you.
Oh no.
Who would win in a running race between me and Joe, do you think?
Well, you start running and we'll see.
How far is the how
Oh
far?
yeah, that's controversial.
A minute. So a minute.
How far? A
Sorry,
minute.
How far? Oh, 1 minute.
And why do you ask this question?
100 metres. 100 metres.
Ooh.
What analogy are you going to? What?
There is no analogy. It's just we got a
It's like
competition
torch to the
coming
hair,
up.
isn't it? Really?
Athletics competition.
I
coming
think
up
I would
soon.
beat you over 50 metres. If my knee held up, I'll beat you over 100, but I'll certainly beat you over 50.
Are you
Oh,
linear
that's a
drive
challenge.
motors or ball screws?
I'm definitely balls.
I can see it from here. It's definitely ball screw.
So I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. This has all been about 5-axis machines, milling machines. We'll be coming back and having another episode where we'll be talking about the 5-axis element from a turning centre perspective as well. So thank you very much for joining me, guys.
Cheers.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Enjoyed-
Tom says thank you as well.
Yeah,
Enjoy your
sure it
dinner.
is.